The cashmere sweater felt like sandpaper against my skin, but I kept my expression neutral as Marcus held up the price tag between his thumb and forefinger like it was contaminated. $32, he said, his voice carrying that particular tone of disappointment I'd grown familiar with over the past 6 months. From that discount store on Fifth Avenue. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. His mother, Patricia Holloway, adjusted her reading glasses and leaned closer, examining the fabric with the critical eye of someone who'd spent decades in Boston's elite social circles. We were standing in their family's drawing room, surrounded by oil paintings of ancestors who'd apparently never smiled, and furniture that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Well," Patricia said carefully, setting down her teacup with a soft clink against the saucer. "It's practical, I suppose." I caught the exchange of glances between mother and son. The kind of silent communication that comes from years of looking down on people together. My fingers tightened around the shopping bag in my lap, crinkling the paper. "Darling," Marcus said, turning to me with that smile he probably thought was kind. "Mom and I were just saying before you arrived that presentation matters in our circles. You understand, don't you?" I understood perfectly. I'd understood since the first family dinner 3 months ago when Patricia had asked what my father did for a living, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer wouldn't meet her standards. I'd understood when Marcus started suggesting I skip certain events because the crowd might not be your speed. I'd understood every time they found subtle ways to remind me I didn't belong. What they didn't understand was that I'd chosen every piece of clothing in my wardrobe with the same strategic precision I'd applied to building my investment portfolio. But they didn't know about that. Nobody did. "Of course," I said softly, channeling my mother's advice from years ago. "Let people underestimate you, Mija. It's the only advantage they'll ever give you for free." "It's not about the money," Patricia continued, though we all knew it was exactly about the money. "It's about standards. The Holloway name carries certain expectations." I nodded, biting back the observation that the Holloway name currently carried about $40 million in assets according to the financial records I'd reviewed, while my various shell companies and investments had quietly crossed the $200 million threshold last quarter. But who was counting? "I've been meaning to talk to you about something," Marcus said, settling into the leather armchair across from me. He crossed his legs in that way men do when they're about to deliver news they think is generous. Mother suggested, and I agree, that it might be time for a little makeover. Nothing drastic, just elevating your look. "We know a wonderful personal stylist," Patricia added. "Genevieve works with all the important families. She could help you develop a more appropriate wardrobe. Naturally, Marcus would cover the cost. Naturally, because in their minds, I couldn't possibly afford it myself. I thought about the Black American Express card hidden in my apartment, issued under my legal name, Catalina Reyes Blackwell. The one with no spending limit that I'd never once used in Marcus's presence. I thought about the vintage Patek Philippe watch locked in my safe deposit box, purchased at auction for $300,000 on a whim. I thought about my Tesla, my real Tesla, parked in a garage across town while I drove a 10-year-old Honda to Marcus's place. "That's very generous," I murmured. Marcus beamed. "I'll set up an appointment. Genevieve is booked months out, but she owes Mother a favor." The afternoon sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows caught the massive diamond on Patricia's finger, throwing rainbow prisms across the Persian rug. She noticed me looking and smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "This was Marcus's grandmother's ring," she said, extending her hand. "A Holloway family heirloom. 5 carats, flawless. The kind of piece that gets passed down through generations of refined taste." The implication hung in the air like expensive perfume. "You'll never wear something like this." What she didn't know was that I'd recently acquired a 7-carat blue diamond from the estate sale of a European aristocrat. Not because I wanted to wear it, but because my gemstone investment portfolio needed diversification. It currently sat in a vault in Switzerland, appreciating nicely. "It's beautiful," I said honestly. The craftsmanship was exquisite, even if the sentiment behind showing it to me was ugly. "Marcus's future wife will wear it someday," Patricia said, then paused as if she'd just remembered I was his current girlfriend. Well, whoever that might be. The dismissal was surgical in its precision. I'd spent enough time in boardrooms to recognize a power play when I saw one. Patricia Holloway was establishing the hierarchy, and I was somewhere near the bottom. "Mother," Marcus said, but there was no real reproach in his voice. Just mild embarrassment, like she'd committed a minor social gaffe rather than a deliberate insult. "I'm only being realistic, darling. You're 34. The right sort of woman, from the right sort of family, with the right sort of connections. These things matter." I took a sip of the tea I'd been served, letting the warm liquid buy me a moment. The truth was, I was exactly the right sort of woman. Summa cum laude from Wharton. Principal of my own private equity firm, though it operated under a carefully anonymous structure. Featured in Forbes's 30 under 30 list 4 years ago, though I'd declined to use my photo, citing privacy concerns. The article had run with a silhouette and the mysterious caption, "The venture capitalist who refuses to be seen." But Marcus knew none of this. He knew Kat, the freelance marketing consultant who lived in a modest apartment in Brooklyn and took the subway to work. Kat, who wore discount store sweaters and shoes from last season, and seemed grateful for dinners at restaurants where the entrees cost what she supposedly made in a week. I'd started the deception almost by accident. We'd met at a coffee shop where I'd been working on my laptop, reviewing acquisition targets for a technology startup I was planning to fund. He'd struck up a conversation, charming and handsome in that old money way that comes from generations of confidence. When he asked what I did, something had made me hesitate. Maybe it was the 3 relationships before him that had imploded the moment men learned about my wealth. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was self-preservation. So I'd lied. Not completely, but enough. I'd stripped away the zeros from my income, the prestigious firm name from my business cards, the luxury from my lifestyle. I'd created a persona that was 90% truth and 10% strategic omission. And Marcus had fallen for Kat, the woman who needed him, who looked at his family's wealth with appropriate awe, who made him feel like the successful one. "I should probably head home," I said, standing and smoothing down my cheap sweater. "Early morning tomorrow." "Still doing those freelance projects?" Patricia asked, making freelance sound like a communicable disease. "Yes. I have a call with a client at 7. The client was actually the CEO of a pharmaceutical company I'd helped take public last year. We were discussing my firm's participation in their next round of funding, but Patricia didn't need to know that. Marcus walked me to the door, his hand resting on the small of my back, in a gesture that was more possessive than affectionate. "Don't take Mother too seriously," he said quietly. "She means well. She just wants the best for me." "I know. And I want what's best for you, too." He tucked a strand of my dark hair behind my ear. "Let me help you, Kat." Let me introduce you to the right people, get you into rooms where real opportunities happen. You're smart, you're beautiful, you just need polish. Polish. As if I were a rough gem that needed his family's refinement to shine. Thank you, I said, because what else could I say? Not the truth, not yet. He kissed my forehead. I'll text you about Genevieve. And Kat? Maybe think about what Mother said, about the future, about whether this is really the right fit. I drove home in my Honda, the reliable little car that had seen me through my first million in earnings, the car I couldn't bring myself to replace because it reminded me where I'd come from. My phone rang as I merged onto the highway. Sarah Chen, my chief operating officer and the only person who knew about both sides of my life. How was the Lion's Den? She asked. Patricia suggested a makeover. Marcus thinks I need polish. Please tell me you're done with this experiment. I switched lanes, considering. Not yet. Kat, this has gone beyond proving a point. They're actively insulting you. That's not love, that's contempt. I know what it is. Then why are you still there? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Good question. The answer was complicated, wrapped up in childhood memories of my mother cleaning houses for families like the Holloways, of watching her come home exhausted, hands raw from chemicals, while the people she worked for complained about their difficult lives, of my father, a brilliant engineer whose accent had kept him from promotions despite being the smartest person in the room, of growing up understanding that in America, it didn't matter how smart or capable you were if you didn't look like success to the right people. Because I want to see how far they'll go, I said finally. I want to understand exactly who they are when they think there are no consequences. And then I'll decide what those consequences should be. Sarah sighed. Well, in the meantime, the Holloway portfolio just crossed my desk. I sat up straighter. Which Holloway portfolio? The family's investment portfolio. They're courting several firms for restructuring. Apparently, Marcus's father made some questionable decisions before he died, and they're trying to optimize. Rothman and Associates sent it over for our consideration. Rothman and Associates, one of the many firms that partnered with mine without knowing the face behind the decisions. I'd built my company like a Russian nesting doll with layers of anonymity protecting my identity. Clients knew they were working with Blackwell Capital Partners. Very few knew that the elusive C. Reyes Blackwell who signed off on deals was a 30-year-old woman who currently had a boyfriend who thought she couldn't afford designer clothes. Send me the details, I said. Kat, no. You cannot get involved in your boyfriend's family finances. That's a disaster waiting to happen. Just send me the details, Sarah. She was quiet for a moment. You're playing with fire. I'm conducting due diligence. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, this looks like you're setting up some kind of elaborate revenge scheme. Revenge implies emotion. I'm simply considering a business opportunity. Right, and I'm simply the Easter Bunny. Kat, listen to yourself. This isn't healthy. But I was already thinking about the possibilities. The Holloway family, with their casual cruelty and their assumption of superiority, were about to invite the wolf into their financial henhouse. The irony was almost too perfect. What's the portfolio worth? I asked. About $42 million in liquid assets. Another 15 in property. Their trust fund structure is outdated, and they're getting killed on taxes. Whoever restructures this could probably save them $3 to $5 million annually. So they'd be grateful. They'd trust whoever fixed it. Kat, Send me the details, Sarah. I pulled into my building's parking garage, but instead of heading to my modest Brooklyn apartment, I drove to the one I actually lived in, a penthouse in Tribeca with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River. This was my real home, the one Marcus had never seen, the one with the art collection that would make Patricia Holloway weep with envy. Inside, I poured myself a glass of wine from a bottle that cost more than my entire fake wardrobe and settled onto my Italian leather sofa. My laptop opened to reveal the dual lives I was living, one screen showing Kat's simple email inbox with messages about small marketing projects, the other showing Blackwell Capital's dashboard with 9-figure deals in progress. The Holloway portfolio arrived an hour later. I spent the evening reviewing it, and with each page, my assessment of Marcus's family grew more complex. They weren't just old money. They were old money that was slowly bleeding out, too proud to admit they needed help, too traditional to adapt to modern investment strategies. Marcus's father had made several catastrophic decisions in the years before his death, and Patricia had been too grief-stricken or too stubborn to course-correct. They were vulnerable, more vulnerable than they wanted anyone to know, and they were shopping for help from firms that included mine. I could fix this for them. I could save them millions. I could ensure their precious Holloway legacy continued for another generation. Or I could do nothing and watch them slowly decline, their casual cruelty coming back to bite them when they could least afford it. Or, and this was the option that made my heart beat faster, I could do something else entirely. My phone buzzed. Marcus. Missing you. Can't wait to see you transformed by Genevieve. You're going to be stunning. As if I wasn't already. As if the woman he thought he knew was the real me, rather than a carefully constructed test of his character that he was failing spectacularly. I typed back, looking forward to it. Thank you for caring about me. The lie came easily now. I'd been lying for 6 months, each small deception building on the last until I'd constructed an entire alternate existence. The question was no longer whether I could maintain the illusion. The question was what I planned to do when I finally let it shatter. The Forbes article from 4 years ago was still online. I pulled it up on my laptop, reading the words that had changed my life. At just 26, C. Reyes Blackwell has built one of the most successful private equity firms in the country, with a particular focus on elevating minority-owned businesses and companies led by women. Despite her youth and gender in a male-dominated industry, Reyes Blackwell has consistently delivered returns that outperform veteran investors. Her firm, Blackwell Capital Partners, manages over $300 million in assets with a portfolio spanning technology, healthcare, and sustainable energy. But perhaps most intriguing is Reyes Blackwell herself, who has never given an interview, never appeared at industry events, and conducts all business through intermediaries. When asked why, her spokesperson said simply, "Ms. Reyes Blackwell believes her work should speak for itself. Identity shouldn't matter if the results are sound." It's an unusual approach in an industry built on networking and personal relationships, but so far it's working. As one client put it, "I don't care if she's a woman, a man, or a Martian. She's made me $30 million. That's all I need to know." The article included that silhouette, the mysterious figure that had sparked countless speculation pieces about who I really was. Some people thought C. Reyes Blackwell was a man using a gender-neutral name. Some thought it was a consortium of investors hiding behind a single identity. Some thought it was all a sophisticated fraud. No one, except a handful of people I trusted absolutely, knew it was the woman in the cheap sweater who couldn't meet Patricia Holloway's standards. I closed my laptop and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably telling his mother about his project of improving me. Patricia was probably nodding along, secure in her belief that people like me were meant to serve people like her. They had no idea what was coming, but they would. The next morning, I woke early in my Tribeca penthouse, went through my usual routine of yoga and coffee, then deliberately dressed down in Kat's clothes, jeans from a discount store, a simple cotton shirt, minimal makeup. I twisted my hair into a messy bun and grabbed my worn purse. In the mirror, I looked like someone who was trying their best with limited resources. Perfect. I took the subway to my office, which was actually a shared workspace in Brooklyn that I rented under Kat's name. The real Blackwell Capital Partners operated out of a prestigious building in Midtown, but Marcus thought I worked here, surrounded by other freelancers and small business owners, all of us hustling for scraps. My phone rang as I settled at my desk. Marcus. Good morning, beautiful. I spoke to Genevieve. She's squeezing you in next Tuesday, 9 a.m. sharp. Don't be late. Marcus, I have a client call. Reschedule it. This is important, Kat. This is about your future. Our future, I noticed, not mine, as if I were a project he was investing in, expecting returns. Okay, I said. Tuesday at 9. That's my girl. Oh, and Mother wanted me to mention that we're having dinner this weekend. Family only, but she thought you might want to observe. Learn how things are done in our circles. Observe. Like I was a student studying a foreign culture. I'd love to come. Great. Wear something nice. Well, as nice as you can manage. Maybe that black dress you wore to the charity gala. That was almost appropriate. The black dress had been Alexander McQueen, purchased for $12,000. But I'd removed the label and told him I'd found it at a consignment store for $200. He'd believed me because he wanted to believe me, because the truth would complicate his narrative. After we hung up, I switched modes. I opened my encrypted laptop and logged into the Blackwell Capital system. Sarah had sent over the complete Holloway portfolio, and I spent the morning dissecting it. The picture that emerged was fascinating. The Holloways had money, yes, but not as much as they projected. Much of their wealth was tied up in property that was underperforming. Marcus's father had invested heavily in traditional industries right before they collapsed, and the family had been hemorrhaging value for years. They were still wealthy by any normal standard, but for a family that prided itself on being among Boston's elite, they were dangerously close to slipping. Patricia's attempts to maintain appearances, the expensive dinners, the designer clothes, the insistence on certain standards were all symptoms of someone terrified of losing status. And Marcus, poor Marcus, had no idea. He was spending like the money would last forever, taking trips, buying watches, maintaining the Holloway image without understanding that the foundation was cracking. They needed help. Real, significant help. And I could give it to them. But should I? My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. When I opened it, my blood ran cold. It was a photo of me. Not Kat in her discount clothes, but me. Catalina Reyes Blackwell, in a custom Dior gown, at a private charity function in Manhattan last year. I was standing with 2 senators and a tech billionaire, laughing at something someone had said. My hair was styled, my makeup was perfect, and I was wearing jewelry worth more than Marcus's car. Below the photo, "Interesting double life you're living, Ms. Reyes Blackwell. Does your boyfriend know?" I stared at my phone, my mind racing. Someone knew. Someone had connected the dots. Someone was threatening me, but who? And what did they want? A follow-up message appeared. "Don't worry, your secret is safe, for now." But I think we should talk. The Holloway portfolio is quite interesting, isn't it? It would be a shame if certain information reached certain people at the wrong time. Meet me at Cafe Reggio in Greenwich Village. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Come alone, and come as yourself, not as Kat. I sat back in my chair, my heart pounding. Someone was blackmailing me. Someone knew about both my identities and was using them as leverage. But for what? I looked at the photo again, analyzing it for clues. The event had been invitation only, extremely exclusive. Whoever took this was either there or had access to photos from someone who was. The guest list had been maybe 50 people, all carefully vetted. I pulled up my records from that night and started cross-referencing. Who had been there? Who had both access to that event and knowledge of the Holloway portfolio? And then it hit me. Patricia Holloway had been at that event, not as a guest, but as a volunteer. I remembered seeing her briefly, working with the catering staff, one of those wealthy women who like to feel useful by helping at charity functions. She'd been in the background, almost invisible, but she'd been there. And if she'd been there, she might have photos. She might have put the pieces together. Patricia Holloway, with her obsession with status and connections, might have recognized me from that Forbes article's silhouette, matched it to the figure in the photos, and realized that the woman her son was dating wasn't who she claimed to be. But why not confront me directly? Why the blackmail? Unless she wanted something? Unless she'd figured out not just who I was, but what I could do for her family's failing finances. This was bigger than I'd thought, more complicated, more dangerous. I had 24 hours to figure out my next move, 24 hours to decide whether to meet this mystery person, whether to come clean to Marcus, whether to walk away from this entire situation while I still could, or whether to dive deeper and see where this game really led. I looked at the Holloway portfolio again, seeing it with new eyes. This wasn't just about Marcus and his casual cruelty, or Patricia and her dismissive superiority. This was about something bigger. This was about power and perception and the masks we all wore. And I was very good at wearing masks. "Sarah," I said, calling my COO, "I need you to dig into something for me. The Holloway family, everything, financial records, social connections, business dealings. I want to know every secret they're hiding." "Kat, what's going on? Someone knows who I am. Someone's threatening to expose me." "Then walk away. Cut ties with Marcus, move on. You've proven your point." "It's not that simple anymore." "Why not?" "Because I think Patricia Holloway has been playing her own game this whole time, and I need to know the rules before I can win." I hung up and stared at the photo on my phone. The woman in that image looked confident, powerful, completely at ease in a world of wealth and influence. She looked nothing like Kat, the girlfriend who needed a makeover and couldn't afford proper clothes. Tomorrow, at Cafe Reggio, I'd be that woman again. I'd face whoever was threatening me, and I'd find out what they really wanted. And then finally, it would be time to stop playing defense and start playing offense. The Holloways thought they knew me. They thought they understood their place in the world and mine in it. They were about to learn how wrong they were. But tonight, I had to attend my Tuesday appointment with Genevieve, the personal stylist who was going to fix me. The appointment Marcus was so proud of arranging, as if I were a project that needed completion. I could cancel. I could blow it off and start dismantling this entire charade right now. But something made me hesitate. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was curiosity about how far Marcus and Patricia would really go. Maybe it was the knowledge that the bigger the fall, the more spectacular the landing. So I kept the appointment on my calendar, and I started planning. Because if someone was going to expose my double life, it would be on my terms, in my timing, with my narrative. Not theirs. Never theirs. Cafe Reggio was nearly empty at 3 p.m. on a Wednesday. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed as myself for the first time in months around anyone connected to Marcus. Custom-tailored Armani blazer, silk blouse, Louboutin heels. My hair was professionally styled, makeup flawless. The transformation from Kat to Catalina was complete. I ordered an espresso and waited. At exactly 3 p.m., Patricia Holloway walked through the door. Not Marcus. Not some anonymous blackmailer. Patricia herself, wearing a Chanel suit and an expression that was equal parts triumph and desperation. She spotted me immediately, and for just a moment, her mask slipped. I saw recognition, calculation, and something that looked almost like fear. "Ms. Reyes-Blackwell," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Thank you for coming." Did I have a choice? We always have choices. The question is which ones serve us best. She ordered a cappuccino from the hovering waiter, then turned back to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I must say, you're even more impressive in person. The photos don't do you justice." "How long have you known?" "About 3 weeks. I was sorting through photos from the Meadowbrook Charity Gala last year, and there you were, standing with Senator Richardson. Something about your profile nagged at me. Then I remembered that Forbes article, The Mysterious Investor. The silhouette matched. So I did some digging. And you're blackmailing me because..." Patricia laughed, but it was bitter. Blackmail is such an ugly word. I prefer to think of it as leveraging an opportunity. You see, Catalina, may I call you Catalina, I know about the Holloway portfolio sitting on your desk at Blackwell Capital Partners, and I know you've been reviewing it. So, I also know my son has been treating you abominably with my encouragement. I know we've been cruel, dismissive, and classist. I know exactly who we've been to you these past 6 months. She took a sip of her cappuccino. And I'm betting you're planning some kind of elaborate revenge. I said nothing, just watched her with the same expressionless gaze I used in boardrooms when someone was trying to negotiate from a weak position. "Here's what I propose," Patricia continued. "You help us. You take on the Holloway portfolio, restructure our finances, save us from the disaster my late husband created. In return, I'll tell you everything you want to know about Marcus. Every secret, every weakness, every piece of information you could possibly use. Why would you betray your own son? Because he's not the man I raised him to be. Because his father spoiled him, gave him everything without making him earn it, and I've watched him become entitled and cruel. Because maybe he needs to learn what it feels like to lose." Her eyes hardened. "And because my family's financial survival matters more than his ego." I studied her carefully. This was unexpected. I'd thought I was walking into a blackmail situation where I'd need to defend myself, maybe pay someone off or threaten them back. Instead, Patricia was offering me an alliance. "What makes you think I want revenge?" I asked. "Because I know what it's like to be underestimated. I was 22 when I married Marcus's father, a scholarship student from a middle-class family trying to break into Boston society. They treated me exactly the way we've been treating you. Except I didn't have a secret fortune and a prestigious career. I just had determination and a willingness to play their game." She leaned forward. "I clawed my way into this family, and I've spent 30 years maintaining our position. I will not let it crumble because my husband made stupid investments, and my son doesn't understand how precarious our situation really is." "How bad is it?" "Worse than the portfolio suggests. We have debts that aren't on paper yet. Marcus's father took out private loans from people who don't forgive defaults. We have maybe 6 months before we have to start selling properties, a year before the Holloway name becomes synonymous with failure. The vulnerability in her admission was startling. This wasn't the imperious woman who dismissed my sweater and questioned my worth. This was someone terrified of losing everything she'd fought for. And Marcus doesn't know. Marcus thinks we're fine. He thinks the money will last forever because it always has. He's spending like we're still at peak wealth while I'm frantically trying to plug holes in a sinking ship. I thought about Marcus's expensive watches, his casual spending, his complete lack of awareness about his family's real situation. Patricia had been protecting him from the truth, letting him maintain his illusions while she struggled alone. "If I help you," I said slowly, "what exactly do you want in return besides fixing your finances?" "I want you to teach my son a lesson. Not destroy him. He's still my son, but humble him. Make him understand that the world doesn't revolve around the Holloway name. Make him see what he lost when he failed to recognize your worth. You want me to break his heart. I want you to break his illusions. There's a difference." Patricia's gaze was steady. And then, maybe, he'll become the man he should have been all along. I sat back, considering. This was more complicated than I'd anticipated. Patricia wasn't just another rich woman protecting her status. She was a strategist, someone who understood power and leverage, someone who was willing to sacrifice her son's pride for her family's survival. Someone not unlike me. "I need to think about it," I said. "You have until Friday. That's when we need to give Rothman and Associates our decision about the portfolio. If we don't choose Blackwell Capital, someone else will get the chance to save us, and you'll lose your opportunity for whatever you're planning." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "One more thing. That makeover appointment with Genevieve, keep it. Go through with it. Let Marcus think he's improving you. The bigger the contrast when you finally reveal yourself, the more impact it will have. You've thought this through. I've had 3 weeks to plan, and unlike my son, I don't underestimate my opponents." She picked up her purse. "Friday, Catalina. Choose wisely." After she left, I sat alone with my espresso, my mind racing. Patricia had outmaneuvered me. She'd turned my own game back on me, offering an alliance that was both tempting and dangerous. If I accepted, I'd be helping the family that had treated me with contempt. If I refused, I'd lose my chance to make them understand exactly what they'd dismissed. Unless I found a third option. I called Sarah. "Change of plans. I need you to prepare 2 versions of the Holloway portfolio restructuring. One that saves them, and one that looks like it will save them, but actually accelerates their decline. Kat, what are you doing? I'm giving myself options, and I'm doing it in a way that lets me choose right up until the last moment. This is getting dangerous. It got dangerous the moment Patricia Holloway figured out who I am. Now I'm just adapting to the new playing field." The next morning, I kept my appointment with Genevieve. The stylist's studio was in a brownstone on the Upper East Side, all white marble and gold fixtures. Genevieve herself was exactly what I'd expected. Reed thin, expensively dressed, with an air of someone who'd spent her life judging others by their appearance. "So you're Marcus's little project," she said, looking me up and down with barely concealed disdain. I'd deliberately dressed as Kat for the appointment, cheap jeans, a Target sweater, drugstore makeup. "Patricia said you need comprehensive work, head to toe." "Whatever you think is best," I said meekly. What followed was 3 hours of subtle humiliation dressed up as improvement. Genevieve critiqued every aspect of my appearance, From my pedestrian hairstyle to my unfortunate clothing choices to my basic accessories. She spoke about me in the third person, even though I was right there, discussing my flaws with her assistants like I was a mannequin that couldn't hear. I endured it all with Kat's practiced patience, even as part of me wanted to tell her that the watch she was wearing, which she'd mentioned cost $30,000, was a fake. I'd authenticated enough luxury items to spot a good counterfeit, and hers was excellent, but still counterfeit. The real irony was that the cheap watch I was wearing, which she dismissed with a glance, was actually a vintage Cartier I'd had deliberately distressed to look worthless. It was worth more than everything she was wearing combined. "We'll start with the basics," Genevieve announced. "Proper foundation garments, a capsule wardrobe of quality pieces, shoes that won't embarrass Marcus at important events. Nothing too flashy. We don't want people to think he's trying too hard with you." The implication being that I was inherently unflashy, someone who needed help just to reach mediocre. "Thank you," I said softly. "I really appreciate you taking the time." "Well, Patricia is an old friend, and Marcus deserves to have a girlfriend who doesn't look like she shops at discount stores." I almost laughed. If only she knew that I owned shares in the luxury department store where she was planning to take me shopping. 6 hours and supposedly $12,000 of Marcus's money later, I'd actually spent about $2,000. The rest Genevieve would pocket, I was certain. I left with bags of clothing that were nice but not exceptional. Good enough to meet Patricia's standards, not good enough to raise questions about how I could afford them. Marcus called as I was loading the bags into my Honda. "How did it go? Genevieve texted that you were very cooperative." "It was wonderful. Thank you so much for arranging it. Send me some photos of you in the new outfits. I can't wait to see the transformation." I took photos in my Brooklyn apartment, making sure the background looked appropriately modest. In each shot, I smiled like someone grateful for being rescued from her own poor taste. Marcus responded with enthusiasm. "Beautiful. You're going to turn heads at Saturday's dinner." Saturday. The family dinner where Patricia wanted me to observe and learn, where I'd presumably sit quietly while they demonstrated how refined people behaved, where they'd continue to treat me as lesser while believing they were being generous in including me at all. Except Saturday was also the day after my Friday deadline with Patricia. I spent Thursday working on both versions of the Holloway portfolio restructuring. The first version was brilliant if I did say so myself. It would save them approximately $5 million annually, restructure their debt, optimize their property holdings, and set them up for sustainable growth. It was the kind of work that would make them very grateful to Blackwell Capital Partners and very dependent on our continued guidance. The second version was more subtle. It looked equally brilliant on the surface, with impressive projections and seemingly sound strategy. But I'd built in several time-delayed problems. Investments that would perform well initially, but crater within a year. Tax strategies that would trigger audits. Property sales that looked profitable but would lock them into declining markets. Within 18 months, the Holloway family would be in worse shape than when they started, and they'd have no one to blame but themselves for following bad advice. It was vindictive, petty, and beneath me. It was also tempting. Friday morning, I made my decision. I called Patricia. "I'll take the portfolio, but not as an alliance with you. This is purely business. I'm going to save your family because that's what I do. I fix broken financial situations. What happens with Marcus is separate. That's personal, and I'll handle it my way." "Fair enough," Patricia said, and I could hear the relief in her voice. "But Catalina? Whatever you're planning for tomorrow night's dinner, I want to be there when it happens. Why? Because I want to see the look on Marcus's face when he realizes what he lost. Call it a mother's prerogative to witness her son's education. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of crisp autumn weather that makes Manhattan sparkle. I spent extra time getting ready, but not with Genevieve's conservative style. I dressed as myself, as Catalina Reyes Blackwell, for the second time in Marcus's orbit. The dress was Valentino, deep burgundy, elegant without being flashy. The jewelry was real. Diamond studs that were simple but flawless, the vintage Cartier watch I usually kept hidden, now displayed on my wrist where it caught the light. My hair was swept up professionally, my makeup was perfect, and the Louboutins added 3 inches to my height. I looked exactly like what I was, a woman worth $200 million who'd been playing dress-up in discount store clothes for 6 months. I drove to the Holloway residence in my Tesla, my real car, and parked it right in front where everyone could see. The valet's eyes widened when I stepped out, and I caught him glancing between the car and me with confusion. This wasn't the woman he'd seen before in the beat-up Honda. The butler who answered the door had a similar reaction. "Miss Reyes Blackwell," I corrected gently. "I'm here for dinner." "Of course. Please come in." The drawing room was full, not just Marcus and Patricia, but also Marcus's Uncle Robert, his Aunt Caroline, and several family friends. About 15 people total, all dressed formally, all part of Boston's old money elite. They turned when I entered, and the room went absolutely silent. Marcus stood by the fireplace, holding a glass of scotch, his mouth literally hanging open. He blinked several times, as if I might disappear and be replaced by the cat he knew. "Catalina," Patricia said smoothly, moving forward to greet me. "I'm so glad you could join us. I don't believe you've met everyone in your true capacity." "Cat?" Marcus finally managed. What are you?" "My name is Catalina Reyes Blackwell," I said clearly, my voice carrying across the room. "Though I believe some of you may have heard of me by my professional name, C. Reyes Blackwell, founder and principal of Blackwell Capital Partners." The recognition rippled through the room. Robert's eyes went wide. Caroline actually gasped. One of the family friends, an older man in banking, started to laugh, then caught himself. "I don't understand," Marcus said, still frozen in place. "You're a freelance marketing consultant. You live in Brooklyn. You drive a Honda. You shop at discount stores." "No, Marcus. Kat, the woman you thought you knew did those things. Kat was a fiction, an experiment, if you will." I moved further into the room, very aware of all eyes on me. I wanted to know what would happen if a successful woman hid her success. If she presented herself as ordinary, even struggling. I wanted to see how she'd be treated. "This is insane," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. He was starting to put the pieces together, starting to remember things that hadn't quite added up. "Is it? Let me tell you what I learned. I learned that you're generous only when you feel superior, that you're kind only when you're in a position of power, that you mock people for being poor while having no idea what real poverty actually looks like." I turned to Patricia. "I learned that your mother is far more strategic than you realize, far more willing to do what's necessary to survive." "Patricia, what is she talking about?" Robert demanded. Patricia smiled, and it was genuine. "I'm talking about the fact that Blackwell Capital Partners just took over our family portfolio, that Ms. Reyes Blackwell spent the last 3 days restructuring our entire financial situation, that she's going to save us approximately $5 million annually and ensure the Holloway name remains relevant for another generation." The room erupted. Everyone started talking at once, questions flying. But I only watched Marcus, watched the emotions play across his face. Shock, confusion, anger, and finally, humiliation. "You lied to me," he said. "You pretended to be someone you're not." "Yes. Exactly the way you've been pretending for 6 months that you cared about me while actually being ashamed of who you thought I was. That's not fair, isn't it? Tell me, Marcus, did you love Kat? The woman who couldn't afford nice clothes, who needed your help, who made you feel important because she had so much less than you?" He said nothing. "Or did you love having someone you could fix? Someone you could mold? Someone who made you feel generous without actually requiring you to be genuinely generous? I took you to nice restaurants," he protested weakly. "I introduced you to people. I tried to help you." "You condescended to me. You pitied me. You and your mother made jokes about my cheap clothes while I smiled and pretended not to notice. You treated me like a charity case while spending money that belongs to a family that's been circling the drain financially for 3 years. That got everyone's attention." Robert turned to Patricia. "What does she mean, circling the drain?" "Oh, she means exactly what she says," I said, pulling out my phone and displaying the portfolio summary on the screen. "The Holloway family has been losing money steadily since Marcus's father died. You're carrying private debt that's not on any official books. Your properties are underperforming. Your investment strategy is decades out of date. You've been maintaining appearances while hemorrhaging cash, and if I hadn't intervened, you'd have had to start selling assets within 6 months. The color drained from Robert's face. Caroline sat down heavily. The banking friend looked fascinated and horrified in equal measure. "But you fixed it?" Caroline asked tentatively. "I've fixed it. Not as a favor, not out of kindness, but because that's what I do. I fix broken financial situations. Your family hired Blackwell Capital Partners professionally, and we've delivered professional results." "For a substantial fee, I'm sure," Robert muttered. "My standard fee, 15% of money saved in the first year, with performance bonuses tied to continued growth. Which means if I save you $5 million, I make $750,000. Cheap, considering what most firms would charge for this level of restructuring." Marcus had been silent, processing. Now he spoke, his voice small. "Why? Why did you do this? Why lie for so long? Why pretend to be someone else?" "Because I've dated 3 men before you who claimed to love me for myself, who claimed money didn't matter, who claimed they just wanted me to be happy. And then I got wealthy, actually wealthy, and every single one of them changed. They became competitive, jealous, possessive. They wanted to control my money, or spend it, or simply couldn't handle the fact that I was more successful than they were." I moved closer to Marcus, my voice softening slightly. "So when I met you, charming and handsome and from a good family, I wanted to know, could you love someone who had less than you? Could you be kind to someone who couldn't elevate your status? Could you see value in a person beyond what they could do for you?" "And I failed," he said quietly. "You failed spectacularly. Not just with the mockery and the condescension, but with your complete and utter blindness to who I actually was. Do you know how many clues I left? How many times I demonstrated knowledge or skills that didn't fit with what a struggling freelancer should have? You never noticed because you didn't want to notice. You wanted Kat, the project you could improve." Patricia stepped forward. "Marcus, she's right. And I've been complicit in it. I encouraged you to see her as lesser because I was terrified of losing our place in society, because I thought love should come with proper credentials and the right background." She looked at me. "But I was wrong, and I'm sorry." It was perhaps the first genuine apology I'd received from a Holloway. "So what now?" Marcus asked. "Do you want me to grovel? Do you want me to beg for another chance? Do you want revenge?" I considered the question. 6 months ago, when I'd started this experiment, I probably would have wanted revenge. The elaborate public humiliation, the complete destruction of his ego. But standing here now, looking at Marcus's genuine confusion and hurt, I felt something different. I felt tired. "I don't want revenge, Marcus. I wanted understanding. I wanted you to see what you were doing, how you were treating people, what kind of man you'd become." I glanced around the room. "I wanted all of you to understand that the markers you use to judge worth, money, status, appearance are meaningless. That the woman you dismissed as not good enough is the same woman who just saved your family legacy." "So we're done?" Marcus said. "Just like that?" "We were done 6 months ago. You just didn't know it. I was always going to end this, Marcus. The only question was whether you'd learn anything from it." He nodded slowly, and I could see him processing everything. The lies, the truth, the mirror he'd been forced to look into. "I think I understand. I don't like it, but I understand. That's more than I expected." Patricia walked me to the door when I left. The party behind us was breaking up, everyone still buzzing about the revelation. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Not just for the portfolio, but for not destroying him completely. You could have." "I could have. But what would be the point? He's not evil, Patricia. He's just privileged and unaware. Maybe this will change him. Maybe it won't. But at least now he knows what it feels like to be underestimated. And us? Blackwell Capital and the Holloways? Purely professional. You'll get quarterly reports, strategy sessions, and my firm's full attention. Your family's finances will be stable within 6 months and thriving within a year. But I'm not your friend, and I'm not Marcus's second chance." "Fair enough." She hesitated. "For what it's worth, I do see the irony. I spent 30 years fighting to be accepted by this family, to prove I belonged in their world. And here you are, more successful than any of us could ever dream of being, and you chose to hide it. You chose invisibility while I fought for visibility. Different paths to the same realization. That acceptance from people who judge you by arbitrary standards isn't actually worth having." I drove home in my Tesla, through the glittering Manhattan streets, back to my real apartment with my real life. I poured a glass of expensive wine and stood at my floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city. My phone buzzed. "Sarah. So, how did it go?" "It's done. The Holloway family knows who I am. Marcus knows the truth. The experiment is over. And? Do you feel satisfied, vindicated, triumphant?" I considered the question. "I feel educated. I learned that revenge isn't as satisfying as understanding, that proving a point doesn't actually change people, it just forces them to confront themselves, and that the best response to being underestimated isn't elaborate retaliation, it's simply revealing yourself and moving on." "Very mature of you." "Don't sound so surprised." "I'm not surprised, just relieved. So what's next? Back to your regular life? No more secret identities?" "No more secret identities," I confirmed. "From now on, I'm just Catalina. No more cat, no more hiding, no more tests. If someone can't handle my success, that's their problem, not mine." "And dating?" I laughed. "Let's give that a break for a while." 3 months later, I received an invitation to the Holloway family's annual holiday party. Not from Marcus, we hadn't spoken since that dinner, but from Patricia. The note included with the invitation was handwritten. "Dear Catalina, I hope you'll join us. Not as our portfolio manager, but as someone I'd genuinely like to know better. You taught me that there's more than one way to be powerful, and that honesty is braver than pretense. I'd like to try being more like you. Sincerely, Patricia. I stood in my penthouse, holding the invitation, genuinely uncertain whether to go. In the end, I went. Not in designer clothes meant to impress, but in something comfortable and authentic. I went as myself, completely myself, with no masks and no games. Marcus was there, and things were awkward but not hostile. He'd apparently started therapy and had made some changes to his lifestyle, cutting back on the spending and arrogance that had defined him. We didn't talk much, but when we did, there was a mutual respect that hadn't existed before. Patricia, surprisingly, became something like a friend. She was still sharp and strategic, but there was an honesty to her now that I appreciated. She told me about her own journey, climbing the social ladder, and how exhausting it had been to maintain appearances for so long. We were different in many ways, but we understood each other. And the Holloway family finances? They thrived. Within a year, they were not only stable, but growing, investing in new markets, adapting to modern strategies. I took satisfaction in that, not because it proved anything, but because it was good work. Well done. One evening, 6 months after the big revelation, I sat in a coffee shop working on my laptop. A young man approached hesitantly, carrying a worn backpack and looking nervous. "Excuse me, are you Catalina Reyes Blackwell?" I looked up, recognizing the expression. It was the look of someone who was struggling, who had done their research and tracked down someone they hoped could help. "I am. I'm starting a company, Clean Energy, focusing on underserved communities. I've been trying to get funding, but everyone says I'm too risky, too unknown. I read about your firm, about how you invest in minority-owned businesses and companies that bigger firms ignore." He took a breath. "I know this is probably not how you do business, but I've been trying to reach your office for weeks, and I thought maybe if I just—" "Sit down," I said gently. "Tell me about your company." He sat, pulling out a laptop covered in stickers, launching into a passionate explanation of his technology, his vision, his plans. He had that fire I recognized, that desperate hunger to prove himself, to change things, to matter. He reminded me of myself years ago, before the success and the wealth and the complicated games I'd played. "How much do you need to get started?" I asked when he finished. $200,000 for the prototype and initial testing. I know it's a lot, but it's not a lot. It's a starting point. I pulled out my card, my real card, with Blackwell Capital Partners embossed in gold. "Email me your business plan and financial projections. I'll review it, and if the numbers work, we'll talk about funding." His eyes went wide. "Really? Just like that?" "Just like that. But here's the thing. I'm not doing this out of charity. If I invest, it's because I believe in your business model and think you can deliver returns. I'll expect regular reports, transparency, and results. I'll support you, but I won't coddle you." "I understand. Thank you. Thank you so much." After he left, practically floating with excitement, I sat back and smiled. This was what mattered. Not the games with Marcus, not the elaborate reveal, not the satisfaction of proving people wrong. This. Finding talented people who'd been overlooked, giving them resources and support, helping them build something meaningful. The Marcus experiment had taught me something valuable. That the best response to being underestimated wasn't to crush those who doubted you. It was to prove them irrelevant by doing work that mattered. I'd spent 6 months as Kat, being mocked and dismissed, learning what it felt like to be invisible. But I'd spent 12 years before that building something real, creating actual value, changing lives through strategic investments and support. One of those things was a game. The other was a legacy, and I finally understood which one actually mattered. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. The pharmaceutical deal just closed. $89 return. Champagne tonight? I smiled and typed back. Make it coffee. I have a new prospect to review. Clean energy startup. Looks promising. You're incorrigible. I prefer driven. I packed up my laptop and walked out into the Manhattan evening, just another person in the crowd, invisible in the best possible way. No longer hiding behind Kat's facade, but also not needing to prove my worth to anyone who wasn't willing to see it. The Holloways would be fine. Marcus would grow or he wouldn't. Patricia would continue her climb, but maybe with more authenticity now. And me? I had companies to fund, entrepreneurs to support, and a legacy to build that had nothing to do with expensive clothes or Forbes, articles, or proving anyone wrong. I was Catalina Reyes Blackwell, founder of Blackwell Capital Partners, and I was exactly enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.